Well, first of all, you're not going to learn anything from me tonight, but at least, as has been said, a conversation might ensue. So, a nice beginning. I believe sustainability is simply about inviting in the great environment that this planet offers, not trying to shut it out. And I guess if there's one message that comes out of the 152 slides that go really fast, that'll be what it probably is. Which is the right arrow for moving it on? Oh, the one with the arrow on it. Excellent. So it's a journey. Everyone's life, everything everyone's got to say is a journey. We began at University of Adelaide, all four of us, and I'm on the right. I'm on your right. Adrian, my co-founder's on the left. There we travelled around Australia in '78 in a combi van, as one did, and we discovered a whole other world up north where people lived. And lived happily and way differently to what we were used to down south. And they built these amazing, crazy houses. This is in Broome. Houses that seem to have no walls or no windows, some kind of amalgam of the two. And no floor plan either, really, just like being in a shed. But all the accoutrement of life were there and the kids were charging around at great speed. So in summary, having come from somewhere like that, we learnt that way up north, depending perhaps on the colour of your skin, people lived with a whole lot less in a different sort of way. First, kind of reminder that less may be more. And so we wrote a book, the first book in 1979 about the history of Australian architecture as opposed to English architecture in Australia. And so then after finishing our degree, we went straight up to Darwin again because we liked it up there and there was no work here anyway. Wheels go around. So this strange place we got to learn and love, and we dug into the history of the place. Once again, no one had actually written about the history of tropical housing in the top end. It's a bit weird. It's not like it was 3 centuries ago. It was just a few decades. And we found that there was these great houses that are just machines for breathing in. Yeah. So one of the things about Darwin is the hottest ever recorded day, I think, is 36.5 degrees. Yeah, so it never gets to the ton, at least in Darwin. By the time you get down to Catherine, 400k from the sea, it gets the other side of 40, and it's got the humidity to go with it. But we all know it has the sense of hot in Darwin because of the humidity that closes in on you. And so why are we called Troppo? We're called Troppo because it's an old-fashioned word about just going with the flow, being affected by the climate and actually accepting that, and doing less. Easy to contemplate when you don't have a job or you're just kicking around and the barramundi are biting all the time and it's a fecund place and there's plenty of food and tucker and all that. But a lot harder if you've got a 9-to-5 job. So I'm not going to answer that question, but one answer, of course, is that a fridge full of VB never hurt anyone. And so people, whether at the top end of town or the bottom end of town, they all lived in these breathing machines that kept no glass, by the way. So once again, it's a new interpretation of what's a wall, what's a window. All materials in that house are solid, and but it breathes. And on the inside is a cool dark space. Psychologically it's cooler inside. Yeah. The old way of Adelaide houses with good old canvas blinds on the outside to darken them down in summer, you'd feel a lot cooler than in a glary glass box like we often end up designing. And of course Darwin has this history of getting bombed and coming back again, but still building breathing machines, probably less fantastic than before, but still nevertheless same principles, up in the air to catch a bit more breeze, and then it gets blown away. And this time she doesn't come back so good. So people start building these hot concrete things with minimal openings. It's no longer a breathing machine. So in the past, people, had this idea of keeping the sun off the face, light reflective clothing. Well, you don't really need the clothing. And so we wrote a book about this, which is our manifesto, and in it we elicited the principles, as we call them, principles of good tropical house design, which is the building science principles we kind of mostly learnt in Adelaide and then researched further through understanding what people were doing in the tropics in Asia and all of that. And it was really just what principles were at play in all the old houses of Darwin. And all of these principles apply here, but we need to add a few more to get them right for here. So this is all about getting rid of hot air. We're not thinking about warming the place at all in winter, of course. But we're learning to cope with the rain that the place has in this particular time of the year. So we set about and put all these principles into play in these funny little cheap houses made with the least possible material, where every little stick did its job. So it was a competition. That was someone else's on your left and ours on the right, which did make the front page of the Australian in 1981. Darwin stakes its future on the green can, because that's what the name was we gave the house, of course, and named after the VB. But it's a simple program. You can see how it can breathe. It's a sausage, so it can be as long and short and divide it up as you wish, and all the wet areas are in one place. So it's just an abstract concept for a house, and a few of them got built, and none of them got built like the original one on the ground. They all got elevated because people kind of like that. It's one of my favourite ever slides. So this is a little tiny house, about 40 square metre footprint, but it's got a loft up above, and that's the view from the front door. And it's that thing of nice and dark and cool, and hey, isn't this a great place to live? Who needs walls? So by that time we're pretty tired, so time to take a bit of a holiday and do a bit of thinking and write it all up. So we came up with a theory of the 10th line. So still my number one theory. So that's got 9 lines. That's a cube, yeah? And that seems to be what drives most architecture. Architects have this idea that they're working with an object and they're going to make the object beautiful. Well, we say bang the 10th line in. And that's the kind of beautiful architecture that results. But if you bang the 10th line in, suddenly the object is no longer an object, it's a frame, and then you can add to the frame what you want, what you need for privacy. If you need a whole lot of thermal mass on the south and a whole lot of glass on the north or whatever, and how you want to divvy the spaces up. So it suddenly becomes a thing for you to play with. It's the way the Japanese used to classically design a post and frame. And so you end up with an architecture that begins to look like that, and obviously can be a dynamic architecture because, hey, it's not always hot, it's not always cold, sometimes it's perfect like outdoors now, but somehow we're in this air-conditioned space pumping around, and it's actually so much nicer outside than it is in here. But there we go. So if you adhere to the 9 lines, the cube, the object, you'd end up with floor plans like that. As we kind of get led along to be a little bit more abstract. So that's the way the 9-liners think about the environment. It's us and them, whereas we like to merge the environment with the architecture. I like the way Whistling Kite and merge their environment with their winemaking. And the 9-liners solve the answer at the flick of a switch. As easy as that, don't have to think any harder. Whereas we have all these fun devices. It's a bit Inspector Gadget, but hey, that's what people have, brains. And so the 9-liners end up putting a lot of material in their house because there's so much decoration, so much object play going on here, and who cares what each stick is doing anyway, whereas we would end up with a whole lot less material. And so we kept going, doing a whole lot of little houses out of the least amount of stuff in funny programs as to how to put them together. And you work out where you need your density of shelter, and one area you don't is the bathroom, and certainly not on the journey to the bathroom. Nothing like, I'd call it, the call of nature to the power too. So, yeah, you need to go, but hey, isn't it fun strolling through nature on the way? It's like the backyard dunning was a brilliant thing, acoustically magnificent, and it's just a great opportunity to take time out. One of the few we have, like you should not take your mobile phone to the bathroom. And so we did like bigger houses in suburbs, which from the street looked all solid, but when you walked inside through the screen, you discovered there was a whole other world actually inside, but where there's a blur happening here. And at night you get this sort of magical little thing which we call architecture by accident. And so this is another competition house, so to win it had to be cheap. If you can't build a circle because they're expensive, the next best thing's a square. So how can you fit a breathing, as in thin, kind of house into a square and give it that sense of breathability? Well, the answer is you bring all the verandas inside and let the kids muck around in view of the cooking and all that kind of stuff. And so this is a big public building. This is the visitor centre in Kakadu. These are, you might have seen some of these things along the way. Most of our work's our old work. It's just got worse in time, so we use a lot of old slides. But so this is a public building, but doesn't have a front door. So the reception is a rock, which is sort of just see a little bit of it there, but it's like walking into a rock art shelter. That was Glenn's idea. He did this with Mr. Merkett, and yeah, the whole veranda is screened against because we're looking north-northwest, but that's where the sense of prospect is. You have to look that way. And so how do you ameliorate the climate? So yes, it's great when you have the perfect orientation, but hey, how many sites does that always happen on? There's something else to bring into the equation. But, you know, it rains, and it really rains up there, and so the whole roof is designed like an escarpment creek. And the water sheet comes off the end, and it not just comes off the end, it comes down in the middle. So the reception desk is just down there, but there's a man-made billabong in the middle that then floods the floodway on the outside and all that stuff. So when it's raining, it's a real buzz, it's a hoot, yeah? So architects worry about their buildings leaking. Well, this one leaks more than anyone we've ever done. We bring it right in. We're really enjoying the day that is. It's actually a landscape interpretation building anyway, so we had a good excuse. So this is a little function centre, restaurant function centre, which is one of those classic things like, how many of you got vines in your backyard that you love to sit under and eat at? And you often, when you're doing it, say, why did I bother building the house? And it's a bit like this. So everyone who goes to Pee Wee's sits outside Pee Wee's, and nevertheless it was designed without air conditioning and, you know, totally opens up for the breeze off the bay and all that kind of thing, and just build out of, once again, the least amount of materials. But if we had our time again, we would have convinced them not to probably enclose anything, I'd say. And so this is a house as a series of pavilions. So there's so many great ideas out there. This is stolen from the Balinese, the compound house idea, where you have a series of pavilions. So your yard becomes your house's walls, and you create all these open movement spaces within it. So you enter through the recycled Indonesian fishing boat gate. And once again, it's a bit like the Kakadu one. We're collecting all the water down the guts, and you'll see that becomes the movement spine, and so that you're playing with the water all the time. But the bathroom, well, the last thing you need in a bathroom is a wall, if you've got a good screen of a garden. And so that's that movement spine. So it's just a series of pavilions that hang around this obviously tempered and shaded space, which is made to feel much cooler because it's always hot in Darwin by water and ponds along the way. And there is no dining space internally. The only one is a veranda, which overlooks the pool. And then, like an antithetical sort of house, because it's a different kind of site, is about 80k south of Darwin, an autonomous house. So obviously in a perfect location to always catch a breeze. And so it's one of those. It's just a new house based on an old idea, really. It's a breathing machine. But I like these slides because they remind us that we have mornings, evenings, yeah, as well as middles of days and night times, and it's just stupid to say it's hot. Well, it might be momentarily hot, but hey, when the cool change kicks in or the heat goes out at the end of the day, it's just different, yeah. And so these, like in Darwin, we would call medium density development, which is a bit less than that here. But once again, these buildings are very much designed around getting that hot air up and out, and having a bit of artistic expression around that along the way. And that whole thing of entering into a dark space, so you enter into entry space and the stairs, and it's dark, and it's so much cooler than the hot, glary day that you've just come out from, and a bit of water along that journey as well. So in a house in the bush, some really nice people that are happily having babies. That you might imagine kids love charging around these kind of verandas and that. And so the whole thing can lock up. People go walkabout, so yeah, you need to lock the joint up, but by and large you live open, and you know when the birds are waking and the cicadas are singing and the lizards are scurrying past and all that sort of stuff. But once again, there's all these devices for opening up at the top and letting the heat out, and at night time you have somewhere to crank up a fire, and hopefully it doesn't get out of control. But I left that slide in because it's in Darwin we came to learn that smoke and fire are beautiful things. So Aboriginal mob everywhere use that as a smoking ceremony, as a cleansing ceremony after death, and it's a regeneration of the bush. It's a way of managing the landscape, and we've all become shit scared of daring to manage the landscape with fire. We've built these magnificent national parks that we don't want to put the torch to, and it comes back and bites us in the bum. So as a society, we've got to relearn a whole lot here, I think. And what I'm trying to say really is the environment includes these sort of things as well. And so a little tiny slide from Queensland. So this is a new little house that Jeff Clark, who worked with us, did, and it's based so much, like Peter Bell, who ran Heritage here for I think 11 years, wrote the book on North Queensland houses, and this house is like a reinterpretation of that. Well, in fact, it's even got that's actually another house, but this one had the same thing. You know, you even get the old casement kind of thing just happening again, a little nod to the past. But, you know, and cheap devices for how to open it up, gas struts, you know, like you have in your car. And then from there we go to the centre. So the centre's a place where if we could define an architecture, well, we haven't really, except in Coober Pedy, which isn't that far away from the centre, where we live underground, and we know we can come up with through the low 20 degrees. And some reason or other, degrees are important in saying whether you're hot or cold. The University of Adelaide has spent a lot of time trying to untangle what thermal comfort means. And at the end of the day, after all their research, it's a very broad range. It's totally individualistic, and it probably has a lot to do with your state of mind, which can be assisted by whether you've got a beer in your hand, whether there's a breeze over the skin, whether it's dark, etc., or whether you feel in control of your environment, perhaps. Anyway, that's one way of doing it, but we can never afford, you can't, out bush, you can't deliver buildings like that because there's no tradesmen or contractors to do it that way. So we've been building all of these health clinics and staff housings to go with that, and schools and odds and ends in the APY lands largely, but other Aboriginal communities around the centre, and they all arrive, as you'll see, on the back of a truck. But you can make these places, you know, thermally efficient as well, and it's all to do, lightweight construction doesn't mean it's going to be inefficient, it's just that you have to get the science right to make it come close to as good as the dream cave. So these are the way we do those buildings. They've all got concrete slabs, so they're tough on the bottom, pretty post-stressed. And then you put them together though in ways that are a bit like the old skinny lanes of the Middle East and whatever. So when you build a big centre like an aged care centre, you have all these spaces in between buildings, so you're always creating tempered light, keeping the dust and the desert out. So they're quite complicated, but they're all built in that same manner. And then to dear Adelaide. So the old is one of our early jobs, so an old villa. Perfect setup, of course, because the villa faces south, but the backyard faces north. So you see, all your thermal mass, all your ballast is there, and of course it'd have the laundry and bathroom on the north side originally. But so you create the living space. You all know about all this. But it's just so lovely to play new with old, to love what you've got, and you can't quite replicate. So it's lovely to put the two together, and you can do that thermally. Yeah. So it's been kind of fun over the 15 years since I've been back, just seeing how the mix of old and new work in domestic work when you're doing the humble house edition. And I live in one of them, and it's really, really great getting through summer that way and through winter. So we all know how to sunshade our north. Once you find north, you can deal with it. So there's another little job like that, which is the world's longest, well, it's not the world's longest, thinnest block, but it's not bad, it's pretty long and thin. And it's a lovely little heritage villa on the front, and at the back, you can see it didn't exactly connect with its backyard that well. So we demolished the later piece, but we kept in entirety the old house and rediscovered magnificent chimney. Surprise. And we added this thing that grafts over the old and appears eventually out the back. And this back little laney world out the back. And so that's the old house, and we only came out 1 foot further. And that's our only west glass, these little louvers, which could well not be glass, I imagine, probably better if they were solid. And our north sun catcher. And internally there's this blur of old and new, but you're always trying to find ways to get the daylight in and to let the heat out of a 1 metre wide bathroom next to the passageway. And so you retreat back in as deep as you like, and that great roof overhang shutters down to the west, and up the top heat rises, but it also can escape from the bedroom area and the bathroom there. So party time. So the EcoHousing project in Whitmore Square, yes, we can all write down what we think all the ASD initiatives should be, and we'd probably all agree on them. And the art of course, is fitting them into the budget, particularly when it's an affordable housing project. So you work out your strategies. But no architecture is architecture, or no placemaking is placemaking without thinking about the people going to use it. And that's not just within the building, it's the whole setting, the public realm that goes with it. And out of that came Cafe Troppo eventually. But so we devised it as setting up a series of muses. No, we've never quite got the gum trees to grow that high in between, but it's an attempt to bring nature back into the guts of an urban building, and obviously the teasing apart enables you to get all the sun angles in. So the way the two level spaces work is that every living veranda has northern sun, every living room has northern sun into it. And you prove that by modelling, but you also prove the thermal performance by modelling, which is what our friendly services engineer does. And so that's an entry there. That's Whitmore Square on the right, and a bit of a courtyard on the left. That's more of a courtyard. So this is one of these muses that open back out to Whitmore Square. And each of those verandas really always get the winter sun, and there's blinds that come out to conclude those awkward cusp times of year, to conclude the thermal performance for them. And of course to the western side there's a whole lot more shuttering down happening, and there's deep verandas, once again though with blinds that come and go, so that because your only view is west if you're in those apartments. So in winter that's your friend, in summer it's certainly not. And beach houses of course this is Kangaroo Island, are the funnest things to do. It's a softer climate to start with, more ameliorated by the sea. People are in a different frame of mind as well. And so this is a mix of rammed earth, yes, in the landscape, but also to south walls in the building. It's a natural site where the views are north, so the roof form obviously works winter to summer. Actually, and importantly, you tease the whole plan apart. This is a crazy looking plan that we worked with Lucy Crawford on, and you create these spaces between, so that you're creating lee spaces actually. So at the beach there's always a wind, which is great some days when it's gentle, but more often than not it's too strong. So how do you create sheltered space to be outdoors in? And a good fractured plan is a good start. But once again, a bathroom, why can't a bathroom be an outside event? So yes, there's an inside bit, but which is this bit. That's the mirror. And outside, hang on. Because there's a mirror on the other wall, we go crazy here. But there's an inside bathroom that opens out straight out to the outdoors. Another beach house at American River, which is modelled on American River being the birth, a breeding ground for the King George whiting. So it's got this lovely serpentine feel to it. So she gets built. Go back one. Oh no, right. So the verandas, so the north side, we're getting all our north in through the highlights on this one because we want to open out to the other side, and we're moving, and because we're windy coming up from the seaside, we're moving in shelter on the north. So it's always an outdoor move. That's from the end bedroom, which you can see how you can walk right through, and so you go down an outdoor movement line on the north, sheltered from the southerlies. And obviously the wallabies come up to chat and all of that. And so it's another little beach house. So this one's facing west. So it's got a whole lot of sunscreening around it. That's the north side. But there's a courtyard that's set up, in between pavilions once again, which is always sheltered. So the whole point of all of this is it's great fun finding a different part to sit. So people become like cats, or in a way, and occupy a part of the site that suits their purposes for the season, for the time of day that is. And you'll have a formal kind of fun, but fun still entry. So I was going to say that in the beginning, so I think what I'm trying to talk about here is the F word. So heat promotes this notion of fear. So not that F word, let's replace it with the F for fun word, and we get fun by integrating with the environment that does offer us so much if we bother to open up to it. So it's our mate Dave down at Middleton, and that's my dog Flossie, another F word. So this veranda is, so the beach, as you might imagine, Middleton, we're facing south through the slide. Why are we building a veranda here? Well, you probably know that down on that south coast everyone has verandas facing the sea and they can never use them because they're always too windy. And the amazing thing is if you stood on the far side of that house when the wind's blowing from the southeast, which it always does in December through January when you really want to use it, you walk around that corner and come back here, and with every step the wind intensity just falls off so phenomenally. And of course north's up this way and a few hills views, so you bang the veranda on the side and you get everything you want. You've got the sun coming in, you've got the shelter from the beach, but you've still got a beach view, and you've got your western screens, and there's blinds here, see-through black blinds to drop down to complete it for the sou'wester when she's too strong. So it's like a dynamic living veranda on which many bottles of wine have been drunk. Yeah, it's almost my favourite job, that one. Dave and Robin's sideways veranda. So this is another little one in Cape Otway. So this is to make you really scared. So it's illegal to start with because it's in a forest, and so we can't talk about where it exactly is. So everything had to be walked in because there's no road there either, so it's super lightweight, and everyone has to be able to carry every prefab panel in. So it's all built. All the walls are Dampalon. The walls and roof are just heat reflective Dampalon. But it's like a bower really. Yeah. So always wanted to do a drawbridge. So that's for when they go walkabout, they can winch up the veranda to lock her up. And there's a little storage alcove off the side, and there's a loft in there with a bed in it. And you can imagine, you can see a little bit there, the dappled light, and it's just forever changing. You don't need a TV. You just lie there and watch it all changing for you, you know. Yeah, so that's that one. And it's in Cape Otway, which is really cold. And I remember when I first came back to Adelaide, and I invited all these people, a series of architects I admired, to come and have a chat. And one of them was Max Pritchard, and he said he gets a lot of complaints, or was getting a lot of complaints from his wife about his own house at Kingston there. And he said, "Look, don't worry, dear, just put another jumper on. You know, it's not really a problem. We'll survive." And obviously that's what you have to do in this house as well. But it's not a house; it's only a weekend retreat for that matter. But it's nice to have a bit of fun. And this is what we call the love tent. There's some of these out in Kakadu. It's a bit like Jungle Jim goes to Bali. So the walls are only like that high, and then it comes up. So the whole thing is like a chimney to just suck the air out. It's a double skin fabric roof that's pulled down, and you can see by now, this is early. By now, it's obviously a gorgeous jungle garden around that. So it's a lovely romantic place to be. And like outdoor cooking shelters to go with it. And almost at the end, so this is out up in the Kimberley, so from like the sublime to the ridiculous here. So this is like the homestead, which is the richest part of El Questro to stay at. This one used to be the dearest at $2,500 a night, and then we got to do these three little villas here, so called, which we turned into bush huts really for $3,000 a night. And each screens adequately from the other, right on the cliff edge there. And you create the privacy, by building a few courtyards. The outdoor shower is basic, as is the outdoor bath. So that's what but of course, because it's $3,000 a night, you need to bring a bit of the bathroom inside, and you need to have a pretty ritzy, expensive bed and somewhere to hang those things. But the whole space totally opens up, yeah. So like you can be on that day bed, and all you got's a day bed. All the walls and screens open around it. So it's kind of, and that's the cleaner's cupboard on the way in. Which obviously is heavily disguised, and that's a building mistake. These are meant to be lovely black jalousie, like air-gapped metal louvers, but the builder didn't put them in as a subject of a claim at the moment. Yeah. But this is really what we want to do at El Questro, which is the other end of things, and that's, everyone talks about glamping these days. Kind of like the concept myself. So how do you make a great holiday experience happen without building a building? Well, it's really easy up north in the dry season because A, it's never going to rain, and B, you know exactly what the temperature range is going to be. And so you identify basically a tree and a rock, and you add a little bit of a bench with a basin in it there, but basically you're bathing in a billabong here, but there's like just a few accoutrements for putting it. Somewhere to put the toothbrush down, and so you work up a beautiful fireplace. It's just like a dream about going camping. You know how you try to pick your campsite, but out there in the Kimberley there's all this stone that's actually already there to use. You don't have to pick it up even. You might need to augment it a little here and there, and so you create these great little spaces that you get helicoptered into out in the environment. And there might be a little treasure chest, with the champagne and the super esky in the treasure chest, along with the candelabra and the blah blah. Yeah, so that's like an example playing up. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I think architecture in this country is about two things, like the retreat kind of stuff, like when to retreat and draw back in. Think the old stone villas of Adelaide, and then the kind of out there stuff, think the contemporary edition perhaps, and you wield those things together to make an architecture that might work and give you some hope of coping with the heat and the cold and all the bits and pieces in between. That's it. Thanks.